all this keylogger stuff's going to this machine in Georgia. So the back door actually had a fully qualified domain name hard-coded into it, so the folks that run the DNS change the DNS tables. I'll skip this case study for time. End users is the #1 way people are detecting incidents from our experience right now. And I think that's very important because I think that trend's different than 1998. 34 of the last 50 times we've responded to incidents is because somebody, Jane Doe or John Doe, is just sitting at work at their desktop and they go, something smells wrong here, we've got a problem. Then they call the magic 1-800 number, guy puts on cape, swoops in, and they've confirmed that we've got an incident. And the #1 way, and this is not the best way, but the #1 way end users have detected a compromise is a machine crashes. So kind of interesting. To me, that's indicative of the kernel level attacks being used a little more often. If a kernel level rootkit is being run on a Windows machine, it may make the Windows machine run in an unstable fashion or crash. Another reason why folks may not choose to run kernel level rootkits on Windows machines is that it will make them run unstable. But that's the #1 detection mechanism. In fact, we ran a case about a year ago where we're helping folks out. It was the only detection mechanism. Machine crashed and we said, oh, okay, now we got a problem. If you're at work and your machine crashes, you may have been just trying to print a PDF document, but Windows is a little more robust than that nowadays. I would recommend if your machine routinely crashes, you have a hardware problem or a security incident, you should at least get a security folks to look at it. And I'll tell you that it's even more probable in Unix. If a Unix machine crashes, I would say it's 10%, 20% increase in the probability it's a security incident. Anytime your antivirus just doesn't run, that's bad. And the frustrating thing about the rootkits that we see that shut off antivirus is that you really can't tell that antivirus isn't running. So the only way you can check is every once in a while I recommend if you open up an Office document, you should see antivirus kick off when you open up an Office document if you have it on there. And if it doesn't, that could be bad. That's when you want to investigate a little bit more. What you do next is go to Windows Explorer, right-click on the directory, say you want to run antivirus. If it doesn't run, you've got a computer security incident on your hands. Next one's kind of interesting, but we've seen it happen too often, and people have detected it this way. If you go to install a new application and the blue shield going across your machine just doesn't finish. For example, let's say you're putting iTunes on a Windows machine and you're doing it from a CD and it doesn't install right, then you download it from the internet and it doesn't install right, you probably have a computer security incident. There's a virus or a rootkit on the system. Double-clicking on an icon and nothing happens, hardware problem, process hung on your machine. I recommend rebooting. If you reboot and double-click on an icon again and nothing happens, you probably have a 25% chance of a security incident on your hands. Certain applications won't run. I'm going to skip to the last one because it's a very obvious one. If you ever hit Control-Alt-Delete to see what's running on your system, I will do a sample, see if it works. It doesn't. All right, Control-Alt-Delete, that means I've been hacked, right? You hit Control-Alt-Delete on your system, and if it just flashes on your screen and then disappears, that's bad. And there we go. Machine working at blistering speeds. Hopefully that doesn't bother you if I do the rest of my presentation with Task Manager open right in the middle of the screen. Then there's the obvious detection mechanisms. If you're a U.S. contractor for the military and your website has this page on it, that is bad. And as facetious as this seems, this is a common detection mechanism that's been around for a couple years now, and these pages are very sophisticated. And it's like having an executable on a machine. It's just that it happens to be served as a web page to folks in other organizations. You know, you don't want to overthink this one. I kind of can guess where the attack came from. For those of you that cannot read the Chinese character set, what this led to is this was a front page on a compromised web server. It was a backdoor. It allowed the attackers from a browser to connect to the victim machine, run any command they want, ping systems on the inside, really do anything. They could view any file on the remote system via that page. Pretty good stuff. They're getting more sophisticated, and they're getting packed using ASPack and other things, so it's kind of frustrating when you find these things. So what are these attackers doing nowadays? I recategorize why people attack all the time. There's attacks for money. They seem to be originating from Eastern Europe. And I'm not stereotyping here. I'm just telling you based on my experiences. of looking into probably over 200 security incidents in the last 5 years. This is the trends I'm seeing. Attacks done for money are coming from Eastern Europe or Russia. Attacks that pilfer information are coming from the Asia Pacific. Attacks for access are coming from guys who want to run botnets around the world and sell them. Attractive nuisances are 15-year-olds trying to impress their girlfriends. And information warfare is the stuff we probably just don't see because we don't have sophisticated enough tools to respond to it. But it's probably growing in its commonplace rather than getting less common. When I look at attacks for money, one of the things I've noticed as a trend is they attack people sitting at home because that's where the money is. The general U.S. populace is probably the #1 targeted area. U.S. credit card numbers are like currency on the internet more than any other credit card out there. What they're targeting is your social security card numbers, your user IDs and passwords, because I always say identity theft on the internet is nothing more than knowing my user ID and my password. Then you go to Amazon.com and buy whatever you want. I'll never notice. You can even sprinkle it amongst my 3 or 4 different credit cards. You can go to Orbitz.com, buy whatever you want. You can go all over the place and buy stuff. So losing a user ID and password in cyberspace is a bad thing, and that's exactly what these guys are doing. How do they do it? There's 2 ways you're going to lose your user IDs and passwords for your online banking or for Amazon.com. It's either A, they hacked your system and put a keylogger on there, or B, you fell for a phishing expedition and just gave them that information, or it's a combination of both. And right now, the most common is the combination. You fell for a phishing heist, but all that phishing expedition did is sent you to a rogue website that exploited Internet Explorer or whichever browser you're using. Right now, it seems to be that Internet Explorer is having the most problems from a security perspective based on what we've responded to. Quick case study on this. I've done this a lot, but the problem is this case study absolutely fits every case we've done in this arena. We've done 7 or 8 different computer systems where people have really lost money. The evidence left behind for every one of these was almost identical. We found a keylogger, we found the keylog files, we saw the person lose their user ID and password. In May of 2004, a woman lost $20,000 from her bank account. She notified the bank right away, and the bank changed their user ID and password. The very next day, she lost just under $10,000. And I know right now you're all thinking, who the heck has $50,000 in their bank account? This must be a bogus story. She was an attorney. She really had the money. The attackers were very happy. So this is what that website looked like. With a user ID and a password, you could get into her bank account. You could pay her cable bill, her electric bill, her mortgage, it didn't matter. Or you could pay these guys in Latvia via an e-commerce transfer, and that's what was going on here. It was just payments to Latvia. When we did our analysis, we noticed that the time date stamps, we just kind of looked at what files were created, modified, or accessed around the time of evil on her machine. We know that she lost her account sometime prior to May 1st of 2004. So when we're looking at her machine, we noticed that on April 30th, there was a file called sds-ini.ini made on a machine. It just looked weird to us because she was running a Windows 2000 and Northward operating system, so we didn't expect to see a .ini file being made that late in life. And when we opened up this file, it was XOR encoded at the time. We decoded it, and this is bad right here. If you ever open up a file on your machine and you don't know what the heck it is, because it's XOR encoded, I recommend you look for the most recurring character. That's probably space, and then you XOR over that most recurring character, and you can probably decode it pretty quickly. Use hex editors, and they'll un-XOR things pretty quickly for you. Anyway, you can see that the woman's identity problems have just started. Not only did she lose $50,000 in unlawful wire transfers, she also lost her user account and password for Microsoft's.net. What does that mean? Guys can read her email. Guys can see what she's ordered. Guys can see whatever. The hackers have a lot of information there. Not only that, you can see, I put in bold, you see exactly what the woman actually sent an email back to her bank. She had just gone online and lost money. Kind of interesting how this thing worked. It hooked her browser. It only hooked Internet Explorer to do the key logging. There's spyware out nowadays that can kind of protect you from some of this. We went into what's called our restore points. What restore points are kind of a great forensic tidbit for you. Anyone running Windows 2000 and North, meaning newer than that, you have system-wide restore points being made every 24 hours and made every time you install new applications, and the author of that application says, hey, make a restore point. These things allow you to revert back to a prior state should whatever you installed break stuff. So when we went through the woman's restore points, we found, I think, over 25 different copies. I don't have the slide in here, but we found over 25 different copies of that SDS.ini.ini keylog file. The attacker had named it .ini, important system file, and the attacker had stored his keystroke log file in a system root directory. And because of that, the system volume restore points were configured to back this file up every time one was made. It was kind of neat. For those who care, the keystroke log file was emailed directly to an account in Russia. The email was also XOR encoded. And the Trojan that affected the woman's machine came with an SMTP server, so the stuff was getting emailed right out. You can see we figured out how she was compromised by reviewing the esoteric Dr. Watson logs. And I highly recommend, if you ever feel you have a Windows desktop that's been compromised, look at your event logs. The application event log will have anytime Dr. Watson created something. And then once you see that Dr. Watson created something, find your drwatsn32.log on your system and review it for programs that crashed. A program that crashes equals someone may have tried to attack it. Back when the Sasser worm was going around, LSAS crashed. Dr. Watson sometimes made an alert on that. Here we see Internet Explorer crashing, and it's an access violation. An access violation is when there's some portion of RAM locked by a process, some other process is trying to do an operation inside of that locked portion of RAM, whether it's trying to execute when it's a non-executable portion of RAM, or whether it's trying to read something it didn't have privileges to. Bottom line is there's an access violation, and that's basically how a buffer overflow against Internet Explorer is going to appear. I hate to say it, there's nothing prettier on Windows native. If you had a host-based firewall, you'd see something prettier. When we saw the Dr. Watson logs, Dr. Watson has a good thing. Every time a process crashes, Dr. Watson takes control of that process and stuffs the memory space for it to the hard drive in a file called user.dmp. This is a hex-based file. It's pretty ugly to look at, but you can see that when we looked at the hex dump of the user dump file, we can see that the woman, at the time she was compromised, or at the time Internet Explorer had an access violation, she's browsing her email. So now you can see how this attack took place. A woman's an email, she's accessing it via Internet Explorer, she must have clicked on a hostile link, and then rogue code was dropped onto her machine that executed the next time she rebooted. What you have on the slides right now is her in email. She's at logicmail.logic.bermuda. She's looking at her email folder, and right underneath the user agent, there's a host and a keep alive. That host was a host IP address in Russia, and right underneath the keep alive was nothing but binary code being dropped onto her system. That's bad. Attacks for information or data pilfering are kind of different, because I see end users being targeted for attacks for money, but when it comes for attacks to steal information, like we want your PDFs, we want your Word documents, we want your PowerPoints, we want your email, particularly, it's just more of a persistent, targeted, ongoing attack, and they're really searching for the crown jewels on server systems, such as a file server or a database. A couple things here. I think the number one way of access, and a quick statistic, in the last 300 systems I've personally reviewed to see if they were compromised. I can't remember the exact number, but it doesn't sound startlingly good. On the last 300 systems I've looked at, I think I knew exactly how that system was compromised 30% of the time. That means 70% of the time I knew the system was compromised, but did not know the initial mode of entry. And usually that's because it's valid credentials. On a Windows system, if someone's got your domain credentials, they can hop from system to system, and very few people ever scour the event logs, the security event log, to know this was really Bob logging on, but this was Bob the bad guy logging on. It just, that correlation never exists. And I think valid credentials are one of the number one ways these data pilfering attacks are occurring. They have a beachhead on your network somehow, some way. They'll have a powerful and well-hidden backdoor to that beachhead, but from the beachhead on inward,